Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, we will begin the Quran recitation very soon.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام را. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام را. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر. وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. ألم نشرح لك صدرك. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. ألم نشرح لك صدرك. ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك. فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا. فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Huda.
And my name is Ali Basit.
And you're watching Education, the art of learning and teaching. This panel is the third in a series of panel sessions hosted by Thaqalain Muslim Association at the University of Toronto St. George, University of Toronto Scarborough, and Queen's University. Before we get started, we wanted to just acknowledge that while this event is virtual, we recognize that our universities are situated on the lands of the Indigenous nations, specifically the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. These territories are included in the Dish with One Spoon, One Palm Belt Covenant, an agreement between Indigenous peoples of this land to take care for the land and water and to take from it only what one needs while leaving enough for others. From a Muslim perspective, this doesn't sound too different from the role assigned to us by God to be guardians of the earth and to not be wasteful. And we hope everyone can join us in being mindful of the land and water that we all share, inshallah.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Huda, and the land acknowledgement. For today's panel, we'd like to welcome three fantastic educators teaching at various levels of education to discuss their experiences and journeys in education, what they love about their job, and what some of its challenges are. Welcome Mina Mozaffarian Salehi, Noor Al-Attar, and Iman Gharib. A fantastic trio. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you all here with us today. Mina Mozaffarian Salehi is an Ontario certified teacher. She achieved her Bachelor's of Science in English in 2010 and her Master's of Science in Education with a specialty in Intermediate English in 2012. And she's been working in the role of high school English teacher as well as school principal over the past 8 years. Both roles have brought a wealth of experience interacting with children and youth, preparing future generations for academia, and strengthening the bonds between students and teachers. I only have one word for all of that, and that is wonderful. Noor Al-Attar completed her honors bachelor degree in physiology from the University of Ottawa. She has a passion for human anatomy and teaching, and was fortunate enough to pursue both interests in her master's degree at Queen's University. She's been blessed to continue working in her fields of interest as a college professor in anatomy and pathophysiology. Her work allows her to interact and teach with students of all ages and backgrounds. She's committed to teaching and student success and strives to help her students reach their highest potential. A proponent of lifelong learning, she enjoys partaking in Islamic, science, and art courses in her spare time. A well-rounded person indeed. Iman Gharib is a third-year university student completing an honors Bachelor of Arts at Queen's University. She's majoring in French studies in hopes of becoming a teacher and principal at a French elementary school. Don't let her bachelor's fool you. Iman has over 14 years of schooling in French. Iman has tutored several kids in both school setting and outside of school. She has supplied in a school and as a teacher and as an educator, getting the opportunity to work with kids who have learning disabilities. She has also been a teacher assistant for beginner French courses at Queen's University and is now serving as head TA in one of those courses. I would now like to pass it back to my co-host Huda, who will explore the journeys of our wonderful panelists today.
Thank you very much, Ali Basit, and thank you all for being with us today. Mina, I wanted to start with you. You've held positions both as a teacher and a principal. Can you tell us what your motivations were for getting into teaching and becoming a principal?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on the panel. It's a pleasure to be here. I think my first epiphany for when I sort of realized or came to the realization that teaching was for me was in my last year of university. I really was enjoying myself. I thought that the process of analyzing literature and attending class and talking about it and discussing it and learning all about the underlying messages was really fascinating. And so I didn't really want to leave. And that was sort of the moment where I had this light bulb go off, and I realized, well, if I really love this so much, I don't necessarily have to stay in university forever. I could join teaching and continue this whole process of discussing and analyzing literature, but do it as a facilitator rather than just a student. I had always also really enjoyed interacting with youth. So I knew I wanted to do something that was giving back, I guess, and involved sort of interacting with this age group. Now, as far as principal goes, that was never something I had planned for. And in general, it wasn't a career goal for myself, mainly because I don't have that natural ingrained drive for management. But I was working at a Islamic school called Wali Al-Ash, and at the time they were opening up a couple of locations or new campuses, and so I was asked to take the role of principal for one of the campuses, and I decided to just sort of push my own sort of boundaries and broaden my own horizons, and I took the role. It was a huge learning curve, I'd have to admit, but I think I just approached it with the same passion and enthusiasm that I had for teaching. And alhamdulillah, I think it ended up being sort of a excellent opportunity for myself as well, and a growth opportunity.
Alhamdulillah, yeah, there's always so much you can gain from just taking that step that you're kind of scared to do, but you feel ready to do in some cases. Iman, you've had your heart, set on being a teacher from a young age. Can you tell us why and what drove you to take this career path?
Yeah, so Bismillah. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on this panel because as someone who wants to be a teacher, I'm really excited to share my knowledge and help other youths or aspiring teachers and kind of give them the tips that I wish someone gave me. So thank you very much. I had two jobs I wanted to do, two dream jobs before being a teacher. But when I discovered I wanted to be a teacher, I think it was because I was very observant in my courses and in my classes, and I saw what things that I would improve. Like if I was teaching this class, it's like something that I would improve had I had control of the class. So and I just have like a natural instinct of just always wanting to help people, and I love seeing people succeed with me. So that's what teachers do. They help people succeed. So I think it was just like the perfect job for me. And it's also a very rewarding job. Just the seeing that light bulb go off, light up when a student understands something, I think it's so wonderful, and it's like it makes you happy because you know that when you go home, you at least helped one person. And inshallah, you help more than one, but at least you helped one. And I've always really been interested in like human behavior, but more specifically children behavior, to see why they understand certain things, why they don't, why they act in certain ways, sometimes why they decide to just get up and jump and kind of distract the class. But, I've always been passionate about that. And I think the teaching the classroom is such a great like laboratory to just naturally observe that. So I think there are just so many great things that come with teaching, and with principal, that's just something if I get like annoyed or bored of teaching or of being around kids all the time, but it's something that's really cool because you kind of get to see the behind the scenes of teaching. And yeah,
your passion for teaching is really coming out in your voice. You're even getting me super excited. I'm not even a teacher.
Right. So I'm not sure if I heard this exactly, but I think you would all agree it is about the journey more than the destination. Moving into exploring and talking about the experiences and qualifications needed for each of your careers or levels of education. Iman, let's start with you. You haven't been to Teachers College yet, but you've gathered a lot of experience. Would you mind letting us know why it was important for you to get this experience? And would you recommend this method for aspiring teachers just like yourself?
yes. So Sorry, the light is like is very strong, but I have found and I have noticed and I have heard that our world is transitioning into a world that really values experience and values connections between people. And so I think I really would really recommend finding like gaining experience to aspiring teachers, but not only in the educational field. So you can do an educational field. You can become a teaching assistant, a tutor, after school program help, even like things like camps, that could count as educational, where we get to work with children. But I did once hear in an education workshop that a lot of skills are transferable to teaching. So for example, if you work as a manager in a fast food restaurant, making schedules, coordinating with people, all that stuff, time management, it's skills that could be transferred into your teaching career. So I really encourage people also to find experiences outside of the educational field, just to get that kind of variety. And also I really encourage aspiring teachers and everyone to make connections, because that is what's going to get you jobs, that is what's going to get you references. So I think that's super important too. Now for me, I want to get experiences because I've heard that teaching only happen, or you learn teaching through experience. It's something, yes, there are courses on how to teach, but you learn it best through teaching in the classroom, because not every child is the same. And then and what the textbook says, for example, in your course is not a solution that you can take for every child. So you really have to experiment and explore and learn what works for you and what works for the children. And also by teaching, you find your teaching type. You find what you like to do, what you don't, how you think kids learn best. So it's really like it's really hands-on. And you also, as like a teaching assistant, for example, you learn how to mark and you learn how to give feedback, which is something that you wouldn't really learn how to do in a class, especially if it's like oral feedback, right on the spot. And finally, I think it's really important to learn how to deal with with conflicts that happen between children, and you don't really, that scenario doesn't play out in a class, in a course, for example. So I think it's really important to just learn what the core of the problem is, and that way, if that conflict ever happens again, you kind of know the steps of I guess resolving that conflict.
Okay, so all experiences could potentially count, is what I'm hearing. Mina, I would like to ask you about the educational and professional experience that one needs in order to become a teacher and a principal. And I think especially the latter, because the path towards becoming a principal, I think that's not commonly known. So if you can expand on that.
Absolutely. And maybe I can even answer the question that you just brought up as well. I think my fellow panelists, Sister Iman and Sister Noor, did such a fantastic job of sort of covering a lot of what goes into choosing teaching as a career path. Maybe I can discuss some of the technical pathways. As far as teaching elementary goes, I believe that an undergraduate degree in any particular strain or strand, I should say, or field is acceptable. And as long as the general knowledge is there, any bachelor degree really will suffice. I believe junior is the same, but when it comes to teaching high school, there has to be a technical element as well. So a teacher who wants to teach science should have a background in science. A teacher who wants to teach English should have a humanities background, and so on and so forth. I mean, a history teacher usually would have history courses under their belt. So I would say that it's important at some point to really understand that if the passion is there for the subject that you are teaching, then maybe high school is a good avenue. And then it's also about the connection that you have. And I think Sister Noor was talking about this, some individuals can really connect well with a higher age group. So being able to interact with adults or young adults. And then there are those who really don't feel comfortable with older groups, and they think that anyone older like the age of like 9 or 10 is really difficult to manage. So I think it's very important for someone to recognize that connection within themselves, because the age group that they are going to work with has to feel the love and the affection that the teacher has for them. And then likewise, they respond in turn. And I think for me, being an intermediate teacher, I sort of always knew that that was the age group that I connected best with. I enjoyed, genuinely enjoyed sort of the interaction and the thoughts and the, that whole process of becoming young adults and learning more about the world. So I knew that I connected best with that age group, and not to say that I don't like other age groups, but for sure, this is the one that I think is most fulfilling. And because it can be a very difficult age group if you don't have that passion, I think it was very important for me to recognize that. And I think I give my students the respect that is really specifically necessary at that high school age group. Now, that's sort of the technical. So it would be an undergrad. There is the 2-year teacher qualification program to get an Ontario teaching certificate. I believe the Ontario teaching certificate is acceptable from anywhere, really. It's just that you apply to the college. So it doesn't mean that you have to go to a teaching program within Ontario to become Ontario certified. And so maybe this is a tip that I can offer. There are many programs that are offered through Buffalo or just south of the border. And you would end up with a New York State teaching certificate, which would then be easily transferable from the Ontario College of Teachers. So I wanted to give that option to students who are looking into teaching and teaching college, but it may not necessarily work to get into a competitive education program here in Ontario. There are many options. There's even, I don't think there's any distance learning at this point in time, although I don't know how the pandemic may have impacted that, but there are schools just south of the border, like 1 or 2 hour drive for us living in Ontario, that might be worth exploring for. So that's sort of an additional tip I have. Now, when it comes to being principal, there are definitely additional qualification requirements. And this is the part that maybe I can branch out and discuss the question that you had posed. With an undergraduate degree, private, I won't speak so much on the college side, but private schools, so private Islamic schools, which is where I'm currently working, has a lot more flexibility. They're not, they don't have the legal requirements that the Ontario public system does in terms of only hiring teaching certified or Ontario teacher certified teachers. They would be able to consider candidates who have a bachelor's degree and who would have maybe some of the other qualifications that are necessary for the role, but don't have a teaching certificate. So that's definitely something worth exploring if somebody is not even necessarily sure that teaching is the long-term goal that they have, but they would like to explore that option. It might be worthwhile to, after graduating from a bachelor's degree, try it out in a school, like a private school. And many of our teachers actually come to us after a undergraduate degree and then realize that this really is their passion, and then they pursue a teaching certification at that point. Now, principal has additional qualification courses that must be taken through the Ministry of Education in Ontario. And they are specifically for principals, so training principals. I personally have not taken those because I was working at a private school. It was just an opportunity that was offered to me through the, I suppose, the qualifications that the management saw that I fulfilled. But a minimum of 5 years teaching experience is another part of becoming a principal. Many times it takes about 10 years for the Ontario public system because they want to see that a seasoned teacher who really does know the ins and outs of teaching in a classroom is then ready to step up and take on a management position. So I think without sort of repeating what the sisters have already covered, and that was very important, I would 100% agree with everything that they also included in terms of the step works to becoming a teacher. I hope that I can just fill in that little gap there.
Yeah, I think you spilled all the secrets of the trade, so that was a very fruitful reply. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the details of the actual job. The task of an educator particularly is defined as someone, teaching and marking, and that may be the core of the work. But I'm sure there's much more that an educator does that many people may not readily see or notice. What would you say are the key aspects of a high school teacher, and sticking to your previous explanation, a principal's job?
Well, I would say that you sort of touched on the shell of what a teaching is. It is about planning lessons and giving lessons. Of course, there's so many different facets that go into planning a lesson that I think are often not understood. So I thought to include maybe the processing that goes into teaching a lesson. So the idea that you have to be able to plan a lesson that reaches out to all types of learners, that you can differentiate and make sure that a student who needs to see material in order to learn it has that available to them, those who need to listen, those who need to do in order to learn. So the lesson planning process itself takes a lot of creativity and brainstorming, and a lot of trial and error. So the growth process for a teacher is ongoing all the time. There's never, I feel like even teachers who have taught for a decade or more continue to learn and change and lesson plan, even if they've done it year after year before. And then at the end of the experience of lesson planning, you need to end up with the student actually learning. I would say the marking is a part of the role of a teacher. And again, that's just that word marking really simplifies what a teacher does. And I think it's important to understand that in assessing students, teachers have to come up with all sorts of activities that are allowing them to observe student learning, that they are creating conversations between themselves and their students in order to figure out how the student is really doing, how they are connecting with the material that is being taught. And then finally, it's the grading process. And I think all the other parts of assessing students is often ignored. And those are the complex parts. Those are the parts that really count. And then, of course, I think what Sister Noor said is at the heart of what I would say teaching is as well, which is that you want to see student success. So a teacher's role really is to connect with their students, to inspire them, to encourage them, and a lot of times they don't have that natural spark within themselves, or maybe they don't know yet that they love the subject. And it's really up to us to create that passion, that encouragement for them, and then have them draw out their own inner talent, their own abilities, and their own connections with the subject. And then the final thing that I wanted to point out for teaching is that there's a very strong teacher-parent connection as well, and relationship that needs to be developed. And many times teachers do have to go out of their way to sort of create and foster that relationship with the parents. That's 50% of their student success is what is happening at home as well. So keeping parents informed, keeping them involved is definitely part of a teacher's responsibilities. Now for principal, I definitely think that the role is a more complex one. Not to say that it is more work than what a teacher does, because a teacher does a lot of work. It's tireless really, but it's a complex role in the sense that it involves a little bit more of an authoritative position and a management role. Principals are responsible for the well-being of their students, for the involvement of parents and the parent satisfaction, really, and then also the teachers and how content they are with their role at present in the classroom. The principal has to be the face of the school, but at the same time, they're really at the core of it as well. So they're in the middle of all the action, and at the same time, they're the representation. So it's interesting to sort of balance that behind the scenes, and then at the same time being at the front of the scenes. That means that really the principal has to model everything. They have to model the rules, they have to model the ethics, they have to model standards for their teachers. They have to be able to develop teacher morale, and they have to be inspiring their teachers, really, because I actually once read a book. It was called if you don't feed your teachers, they will eat the students. And I thought it was a very funny book title, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense that if you don't give your teachers what they need in order to do their jobs well, then of course they're not going to be able to do justice justice to their students. So encouraging them, giving them resources, supporting them through challenges, through anything really, that even passions, supporting them through their passions really fosters a healthy school environment. And then of course the parent element of it, a principal must be able to reach out to the parents, hear them and their concerns. Oftentimes the principal is also the connection between the community and the school as well. And so that element of it is shouldered a lot of times by a principal. It's a very, very rewarding and fulfilling, both of them really are rewarding positions, but I would say that, and both of them have their own overwhelming elements of it, but very rewarding positions, both teacher and principal.
Yeah, it's good to see that teachers do notice some of the behind the scenes and passions of students. Because when I was in high school, it was very common to get the reply that, what would you do after high school, or what are you going to go into? I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm going to try this and then see how it works. So I'm not sure if it's just you or a minority of teachers, but it is refreshing to hear. Iman, what are some of the experiences, whether good or bad, that you had that you didn't expect going into various jobs you've held?
So this question is very interesting because there are a lot of things that you learn when you're actually in person. I'm gonna concentrate on children because I've worked in elementary schools most of the time. But one thing that I've noticed is that kids ask the cutest, funniest questions. And you just have to come up with an answer on the spot. Sometimes randomly during a lesson, they'll be like, I had a student ask me like, "Is your watch a Rolex?" And I was like, "What does that have to do with the multiplications that we're learning?" But you just gotta give them a quick answer, kind of feed the curiosity, and then just move back on to the lesson. So I think that's something that I enjoy it because I think it's funny and it's cute. But that's something that you have to deal with when you're a teacher. Also, as a woman who wears a hijab, I've had multiple experiences, and the hijab is normal for me. So I didn't really expect this, but a lot of students would ask me about the hijab. Some would even learn from their other Muslim friends that, for example, you can't eat pork, and so they'd ask me about these types of these religious questions. And I guess it's just become normal. It's just become normal for me to have to answer these questions at any time. So if you're a Muslim, I'd say expect a few questions from students about those types of things. Another thing, and I'm sure Sister Mina and maybe Sister Noor, I'm not sure how it works in college, but she could probably back me up. But as a teacher, you also have to deal with the extracurriculars. And the event planning and the school parties and school potlucks and everything that. So I think people sometimes forget that, even like trips, like staying away from your family from 8:30 or 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that's something you have to keep in mind as well. So those are kind of fun things. I find them fun, but it's just it's another extra step and process that you have to do as a teacher. And finally, the last thing, and those were all positive things, but one thing that I wish someone told me, but that I learned a bit, not the hard way, but I learned while I was in the classroom, is that you have to deal with children's emotional problems, with children's, like even family problems. There was one student who couldn't go on a trip because her parents didn't have enough money to pay for the trip, and the teacher, told her, okay, we'll take from the school's budget and help you assist, go to that trip. So it's more the hard part of the teaching experience, and that's dealing with kids. And kids are usually so open, they'll tell you anything and everything. And honestly, as a teacher, I'd rather know that than them just bottling it up and not being able to tell anyone. So just like a warning to future teachers, there are some tough moments, but there are also resources out there that can help you deal with this type of stuff. And you always have your teacher friends to help you with that.
Yeah, and that note about partying, I don't know what it was about my school, but there wasn't any of that going on. So in other words, about the children, I guess uh, you kind of need to match their energy, and they're spontaneous, so you kind of have
Mhm.
to be spontaneous as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd rather like feed their curiosity than just leave them hanging and always having like a strict, like always sticking to normal teaching.
The future of teachers. So now I'd like to pass it back to my co-host Huda to go over some of the challenges and joys of being an educator.
Yes. So thank you very much. Inshallah, we'll go through these next two sections. So, over the past 6 months, educators have had to deal with, something that I don't think anyone would have guessed was coming their way, having to move their classroom online and having to adapt to a new system of schooling because of COVID-19. So, Mina, can you start us off by sharing some of the challenges you've had to deal with this new system? And also, what are some of the general challenges you've had to deal with as a teacher and principal?
Definitely. So yes, I agree. I think it was a challenge, especially trying to get both students and teachers on the same page as far as technology goes. So maybe there was a little bit of a technical learning curve for all of us in the beginning. But without a doubt, once even that process was achieved or like overcome, I think the biggest challenge was how do you engage students and interact with students that you can interact with, that you can actually see often. And a lot of times engagement is about how you are developing that interaction, that eye contact, having them listen to you and bringing forward that energy. And I think in the beginning, I took my material that I usually would teach for that class and I had to revamp it. And almost like within a week, I had just put the whole thing aside. And I thought, okay, well, this isn't going to work in this platform. So what I have to do now is I have to work with the technology. I can't do what I usually do, which is to have a bunch of activities and we would discuss in class. And then I might ask a few questions here and there, but I don't have my students online live all the time. So I can't do that anymore. I can't ask you a question here and there. So I had to come up with new techniques. I used a lot of these like breakout ideas, breakout room, I should say, escape room ideas. And that way the students are interacting with the material, which is ultimately what the goal of the teacher is, to have the students learn and interact with the material, not just with me. So I had them sort of interacting with the material in a very fun and enthusiastic way. And at the same time, they're able to use the technology to end up with the learning that's supposed to happen. And yeah, as far as challenges with the role of the principal, now, ever since I actually have been on maternity leave, I haven't returned to the role of principal, but I would say the biggest challenge that I faced at the time was that your role is, I think it's misconstrued that the principal is really just a disciplinarian, and that's not at all the case. I think your challenge is that you end up with a student who the teacher is having a difficult time connecting with, which means that the problems that come to the principal are already at a higher level or an escalated level. And what you're really left with is this challenge of reaching out to a student that is difficult to reach out to, or breaking through a barrier that is, or a wall that they clearly have put up and that the teacher wasn't able to get past. A lot of times it means investigating what the root causes of these issues are. And I think the biggest challenge is when you're not able to succeed. As a principal, as a teacher as well, you're there because for the love of the students, really, and the fact that you want them to ultimately walk away with everything that you had planned for them, and like this, you see a big, bright future for them. And I think the hardest thing is not being able to break through to a student and not being able to get them to where they recognize their potential or want to be there.
Yeah, especially you've talked so much about, wanting to help students grow, and when you can't do that, it must be really frustrating.
Very much, yeah.
So Iman, for you lastly, and I think you've talked about this a little bit already, but what are some of the difficult parts that you found of being an educator so far, and bridging it sort of into the next section? What have been some of your highlights? I think you've talked about that, but if you wanted to share a bit more.
Yeah, so relating to some things like with COVID, I had the privilege of being I started actually being a teacher assistant during the COVID period. So I was, alhamdulillah, I was able to start my teaching assistant career in that environment already. I didn't have to do the switch. But as a person who really values interaction, like facial expressions, I think that's the part that I miss the most. And that's really difficult is if everyone has their cameras off, and we have a rule because of an incident that happened in tutorials, you're not allowed to have your camera on unless you're in a breakout room. So when a student types in the chat a question and I answer and I say, do you understand? They either just say thanks, or they turn their mic on for a second, like, yes, I understood, thank you, and then turn it back off. But I'm not sure if they actually understand, with the facial expression, to be able to say, sometimes they fidget in their seats, like not sure, but they say yes. So I think that's a part that I'm really missing from that, from teaching in person. Also the no use of a whiteboard. So with the language, when you're teaching French, the grammar, the writing is super important. And so I don't have a quick a quick whiteboard where I can write on. So it's really having to navigate through that, maybe typing out on the computer. But then you can't, underline stuff or do all that thing that you can do in person. So I think that also is something I miss. Another difficulty is the communication between students and as Sister Mina and Sister Noor said, it's really important to have that constant engagement, communication with your students. And sometimes as TAs, we have a rule that no one's assigned emails on the weekends. However, if something's due on Sunday and kids and students are panicking, I feel bad for leaving them hanging. So I do have to take 5-10 minutes out of my weekend to reply to them, which is something, had they been in class, maybe they would have asked me during the actual tutorial time. But now that we have access to each other 24/7, it's just constant emails going back and forth, even setting up meetings, which are hard because everyone has a different schedule. So I think that's one thing. And yeah, just answering questions all the time from students. But there are some highlights, and whether it's online or in person, it's just so fun to teach and so fun to see people understand. And even you get to learn yourself. There's this kid who keeps posting questions about the French language, the context, the history, and all that stuff that I don't even know the answer to, but that I find out because they asked that question. And as I mentioned before, just going back to the younger children, just the questions they ask, just the fun that they have, the little, I won't call them arguments, but the little back and forth with them. Some kid once wanted to sleep on the rug that they had in class, and I was like, well, no, you can't do that. And they're like, well, why? I'm tired. And I'm like, what if the principal comes in and sees me, a supply teacher, letting a student sleep in class? You trying to get me fired on my first day, kind of thing. So it's just that there's so much fun and joy that comes with teaching, as well as the difficulties as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate your approach. It's an empathy, but there's a firmness in there as well, which is a really, I think, a great mix. But I'll turn it over to Ali Basit for the next question.
Yeah, I think I speak for many students when I say, why is it due on Sunday? But moving on, so you shared your challenges. I think I'll cover the fun parts. Noor and Mina, you've shared the challenges, but what are some of the joys of your work? You can go in any order.
Okay, maybe I'll take that one first. Well, honestly, the students are my joy. I just really enjoy watching them grow. It's so rewarding when you see them actually understanding and taking part in the activities, and then getting the feedback from them when there's so many times where someone will send me an email and be like, that was actually so much fun. Thank you for designing a lesson for us that we could actually have fun with. And I really thought this was going to be a dry course, but it wasn't. And then when they start to recognize their own talents, so for example, they start writing essays or they start writing study poetry and they realize that they actually are very good at it, and that this might be something that might be like a hidden talent of theirs that they've discovered. So I would say the students are enjoyable. And then finally, I think when I began speaking, I said that in university, I really enjoyed myself in this process of learning about literature. And I think that fun has never left. So those are the biggest highlights for me. Those are the most enjoyable parts.
Yeah, and so we will move on to the last section before the audience questions. And so this is really just about, how Islam motivates you. So, each of you has such incredible outlook on teaching, and your passion is so clear, not just for teaching, but for helping your students grow. We wanted to know how Islam motivates you, to do the work that you do, or if you find that it informs your approach to teaching and being an educator at all. So maybe let's start with Iman.
So my goal is to have Islam at the base of everything that I do. And as a teacher, and there are many like hadiths and stuff like that say that teaching or passing on knowledge is super important. Even the prophets did it. So your role as a teacher is super important, especially because you're forming the next generation. You are the one who is making society progress. And so I think, especially as a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, one of my roles is, as Sister Noor just explained, is like a representation. You are there to answer the questions. You are there to break down the stereotypes and the myths, the false myths that these students have in their head, maybe because they learned it from their friends, from their media, from their parents. You are there as an example. And I think that's super, super important. And it is something that you are going to encounter if you are a Muslim. You're going to encounter a lot of questions from curious students or kids. And last thing is, I don't believe that education and classroom is only for subjects like science, math, French. It is also to teach kids how to live in a society, how to live, like how to collaborate with other people, how to be kind, how to, you teach them all these things because you do spend most of the day with them, So we're not only here to teach them about subjects, but also to teach them about life. And so I think Islam encompasses a bunch of good values, kindness, empathy, respect, that teachers need to pass along to children as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people, don't realize about teachers is that they're teaching more than just these facts and this knowledge. There are examples, for example, in the way that they treat others or the way that they manage conflicts. Mina, how about yourself? Does Islam serve as a motivation for you in any way?
Yes, absolutely. And I think in a way I have the easiest role as far as Islam goes, because working at an Islamic school, it's the environment is basically set for me. Personally, I think that staying within an Islamic school is for sure a choice that I'm making. It's there's a lot of perks to basically working in the public system that you are in a way foregoing by staying within the private school system. But the reason that I do that is because I feel that the giving back to my own community and being able to talk to children who are basically like me, growing up in a Western civilization, and at the same time trying to come to terms with their own Islamic identity. I think being able to give them my experiences, navigating through that, and then in a way equipping them for dealing with the challenges of it directly. I think that's one of the main motivators for me. And then I think it's very liberating in a way to be able to discuss Islam freely in the environment that I'm in. So I get to talk to my students about how, from an Islamic perspective, we might approach this piece that we're studying, and whether or not our value system may be in conflict or in complement to the critics, like what do other scholars say about it? Do we agree? Do we disagree? So I find that to be a very an easier and more liberating element. I feel very much as if the journey for myself in terms of incorporating more of an Islamic viewpoint and just being able to explore Islam on an ongoing daily basis is facilitated through the environment that I'm in right now. So it's always been a motivator for me. It's always been a factor, but I find that it's just a lot more accessible in the environment I'm in now.
Yeah, that really speaks to how, your surroundings changes, or like your approach even, or allows you to incorporate things that you may not have been able to incorporate in other settings. But so inshallah, we'll go into audience questions now, and we'll pose one to each of you, inshallah.
Yeah, that section was so compact. I have nothing else to say about that. So a question for Mina. An oft-repeated phrase is that educators don't get paid enough or sufficiently. What can be said to those that dissuade others from entering this discipline solely based on the expected incomes?
I think a lot of teachers were sort of entering the field on two accounts. One of the financial benefits, and the other because Teachers College used to be easy. And I think both of these approaches really are the wrong perspective to have, because with any field, I mean, if you're going to be a doctor strictly on the income basis, you may find that it's not as fulfilling as you expected it to be. And the second, of course, is that that's not what it's about. And I think with teaching, it's the same. I think teachers work extremely difficult, and I think compensation is a necessary part of course, living. It's not to say I don't want to sort of downplay the fact that teachers should be compensated, but it's definitely not something that should be the reason that somebody enters the field or chooses to become a teacher. You may find that no matter what the income is, it will never be sufficient to cover the amount of effort that goes into being a successful teacher. The other part of it is that the passion for teaching and the joy that you get from interacting with your students, and then what you're giving to them in taking on this role should be at the forefront of why you're doing what you're doing. I guess I come back to this thing that I think if you ever pursue something for financial reasons, you might be disappointed. It may not satisfy you the way that you think it does. Whereas if you were to approach teaching with compensation as a secondary element, I mean, it's just something that you need in order to, live in a society, then you may actually find that the joy that you take from waking up every morning and not being like, oh, work today, might really supersede anything that you get financially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I can't disagree.
Yeah, that's such an amazing point. It's, looking forward to the job that you're going to be doing, especially one as difficult as teaching, is, loving it is so key in being able to, to be able to find that motivation every day. So thank you for reminding us of the importance of passion there. So a question for Iman, what suggestions do you have for someone with a graduate degree who wants to teach but doesn't have any experience?
Like an undergraduate degree? Okay, so I would encourage you to go get experience, but I'm talking specifically about Ontario, we are in such need of teachers, and so I think if you have the passion, you have the drive to do it, you can apply, but just make sure that you talk to people, you talk to other teachers, you get their tips, you get their experiences. If you are also willing to, you could take like a few psychology courses, because because I haven't had my education courses yet, but I'm still really intrigued by child behavior. I decided to supplement some of those classes with psychology classes, where I was able to learn about children behavior, learn about how children control their emotions, or why they get angry, or their motivation behind this sort of thing. So I would encourage that. I would also encourage, there are so many resources, so many books, so many TED Talks, so many videos that teach you about people's experiences and that teach you about education. Like I sometimes put them on in the background, like just for fun. I know it's kind of nerdy, but just for fun. But I get those I get those tips from teachers who have experience, to see what went wrong for them and how they were able to fix it. So there are other ways to get into the teaching field and to supplement those experiences. You'll just have to put in the effort, and make sure like you have the passion for it. And yeah.
Yes, much like this very panel, make sure to put this on for fun and listen to it whenever you can. Yeah, Mina, sorry, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I think that's excellent, what Sister Noor just suggested. So I guess to build on that, I think it's important for those of us coming from an Eastern cultural background to also explore career paths that are not strictly science or engineering, or the ones that our parents have in their mindset that that's the best career avenue. I found that when I was going into English, I was one of probably the only Mahajaba girls in the program. So I think it's my advice would be to try and explore some of these humanities as well, especially if you're interested in teaching and have that interest for some of the arts or the humanities. I think it's that passion, as long as it's there and that spark is there, it will make you successful as an educator. And then my other advice is that teaching is such a noble and satisfying career. And I feel that if you're one of those people who just needs to see the results of what you're putting into something in order to be motivated to continue it, this would be the career for you. Because with teaching, you don't have to wait a very long time in order to see the reward or the payoff for what you are putting in. You can even walk away from a lesson feeling really good about yourself because the lesson went well and your students responded the way that you wanted them to when they learned. So these are, I think, the final things that I have to say. It's a chance to be rewarded on a daily basis, not just to, and then also in the long term when your students graduate and then maybe they come back to you and say, I'm so inspired still by what you taught me, which is also a great feeling. And then it's just the nobility of being able to give back. This is a way for you to, if you want to do something in which you help others, it's not just like the medical or health care field that allows that to happen. Education does as well.
Very nice. Thank you for that conclusion or conclusive point. Iman?
So what all Sister Mina and Sister Noor said are amazing. I'm going to sum up their conclusion. So one thing is, of course, get experience. I started as a tutor. And for those of you who are still in high school and would like to be teachers, stay in contact with your teachers because they, and be good with them, show them good manners because they will be references and they can call you if, for example, if they knew that you were really good in science and they need a tutor for a student or help in after school programs, they will call you. They still call my sisters and I. We got an email the other day, asking if we could come and help in the school. So make sure you maintain that contact. Second thing is teach if you are passionate, because these students' lives depend almost entirely on yours, and on your teaching and on your passion for what you're teaching. So make sure that you are passionate when you teach. And don't forget, like, you are teaching the next generation. Like, these are the people who are going to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, all that. So even firefighters, so just make sure you do that. And the last thing that I learned from my favorite teacher, I know you're not supposed to have favorites, and my second favorite teacher, which is my mom, is that you set rules when you come into the classroom. Set rules that you don't tolerate disrespect, that you don't tolerate racism, that you don't tolerate all these stuff. And make sure that in your classroom, you also have fun. So make sure that they know what your limits are, but that they know that you can have fun and that you can that learning is fun. and that it's not only purely like educational. And thank you so much for having us as well on this panel. It was very fun.
Yeah, of course. I think to sum it up here, a lot of talk about passion. Maybe a quote from Imam Ali. He says, "Learn what inspires you. There's too much for one person to cover on its own." So yeah, back to Sister Huda to end us off.
Thank you so much for bringing that hadith in. And Iman, I'm not sure how your mom's going to take being your second favorite teacher, but you can figure that out after.
She's my first.
So like I'm so disappointed to be ending this conversation with all of you. Your passion really shows through, and your wisdom we're so grateful for it, and for you sharing your experiences with us today. And thank you for the incredible work you do, raising the future generations. And of course, thank you to our audience for tuning in. And inshallah, you found this